So welcome, this is our Solstice Rites video, and I'd really hoped to be doing this outdoors, but there's been a whole bunch of things happening that prevent me from making it out there today. There may be a part of this video that I'll do outdoors in the next day or so before we put this online. So as part of the solstice rites, there's a number of different sort of old practices. One of the practices is to make a Vinok, a wreath, and the wreath is usually made out of natural materials, plants, flowers, grasses, you name it. Depending on the time of year, you may make different ones with whatever's available. You know, even in the winter, if you find rose hips, for example, you could make a wreath using the rose hip and rose hip branches. As it happens today, part of the reason that I'm not outdoors is that my parents' aspen trees are dying, and so they're cutting them back, or they're having somebody cut them back for them. So I gathered some of the little branches that remain, and I'm going to make use of those as some of my natural materials. And they have a lovely garlic chives plant that is putting up millions of flowers right now. So I cut back some of the flowers so that the plant can continue to be green and not convert itself to a lovely yellowing plant once the flowers have done their job. When you cut back the flowers, it encourages the plant to continue to grow and make more flowers. So that's one way that you can make use of the flowers, is to actually cut them back as much as possible, and even cut quite a bit of the greens back, and it'll keep producing through the growing season. So these are the two materials that I'm going to make use of. I've talked about this before, but I'm in the northwestern Ontario area. I've brought in some ants. Lovely. I'm in the northwestern Ontario area, and right now we're just starting to get flowers. It's already summer solstice, and we're just getting into the flowering season. So I didn't have a lot of wilds that I went and picked because I actually don't want to interfere with their stage of growth right now. And so I'm making use of what's here on the property. I'm just going to pause the video. Okay, ants taken care of. So what you'll need for our work together for the rite is to gather materials. You can use flowers and greens that you have in your backyard or on your street, or you can go to a natural meadow and pick some, or it's totally up to you. And you can have as many as 13 different kinds of plants that you might want to put together, one plant per lunation of the year, 13 different moons or 12 different moons depending on the year. So vine plants, I'm only using 2 this year. Other years I have more complex wreaths that I make, but this year it will be just this. And so the project is really simple. It won't take us long to work through it. It's really just a matter of learning the technique of weaving. You have a couple of choices. You can do a simple braid if you happen to know how to braid. You can do a multi-stranded braid, which will have, you know, more than 3. Maybe you'll do 5 or 7 or 9 or more. In terms of strands and branches that you're braiding, I'm going to show you a technique that's not a braid, but sort of almost like a knotting kind of a technique that helps to place the flowers and or leaves and branches in the exact place where you might want them to show up on the wreath. And just before we get started, so the summer solstice is part of the solar year rites, not the lunar rites, but the solar year rites. As it is this year, the first quarter moon shows up one day after the summer solstice reaches its peak. And so at the summer solstice, we are celebrating fire and water as elements. I have my candle going. So here's our fire element. The water elements are close by. I'm wearing a copper cup as part of that representation of water. There's definitely liquids leaking on the bottom of my cut garlic chives. But what's going to happen when we're complete making the Vinok is that we're going to release it to a natural body of water, to a river, to a lake. And you'll release it with a prayer, with a blessing for the waters, for the land, for yourself, for your family. And so remember that any act of weaving, any act of braiding, any act of spinning, or making cordage, twining, all of that is done with prayer. That we actually infuse prayer into the binding work that we're doing. These are all forms of binding. So while we're making the wreath, that's something to keep in mind, is like, what is it that you want to infuse as prayer and intention into this particular wreath? And what's interesting is that you're using materials that are of nature and alive. They're plant materials, and we give thanks to those plants who are gifting us with their life force for this particular project. And as part of that, then doing respects to the plants, saying thank you to them, giving blessings when you take the plant, making sure to ask the plant ahead of time, leaving a gift or an offering is very appropriate. The other thing to keep in mind is that as we're doing the binding work with the wreath, it's useful if you can do it all in one sitting. It keeps the mood, intention, and prayer consistent. So if you don't think you're going to have time to do it all in one sitting, then perhaps you might want to set it up for another time. If you absolutely need to step away for whatever reason, you can leave your work where it is with the plants, but I tend to put like a little cloth over top. Symbolically, that means that I'm putting it into a container, and I'm allowing it to be protected for the time that it's residing there, while I have to step away out of the ceremony work. So those are a few thoughts to keep in mind. When we make a wreath of Vinok, what we are doing is creating a circle. And that circle has many different kinds of symbolic representations. So the circle of life, from birth through life to death and rebirth, that full circle. You can also think of the circle of a year, the wheel of a year. So right now we're at the summer solstice. And as we shift through the summer solstice, we'll come into the waning time of the solar year, where as of the next day, we're already experiencing less light. Of course, it takes time for that to really become pronounced. But for sure, by the end of August, we begin to notice that the sun is going down considerably earlier than it did, a month to a month and a half earlier. So as we move through the wheel of the year, we can think about what the circle represents as cycles of time, as the circle of completion and also continuity within the cycle of time. Then you might think about what a circle actually represents to you personally, what you're amplifying or working with as a personal symbol of circle. So allow all of those different representations to weave themselves into your work. Okay, so why don't we get started, and I can just keep talking as we go. I'm going to start with a single branch, and I'm not actually going to take off a lot of the leaves, but I will take off a couple small branches just to extend my capacity to weave. I have some material that's fallen off, and I'll just add that to compost later. So I have one main branch that I'm going to start with. And what I'm going to try and do as much as I can is keep the leaves and little branches all toward what I will call the top, which is basically away from me. That helps it to line up kind of in a nice tidy way when it comes time to putting the wreath on. The next thing that we're going to do is cross a second branch over top. Okay, so it's crossed over top. And as I cross it over top, I'm also going to bend the branch underneath and then over top of what I just laid so that it looks like this. I'll repeat that so you can see what's happening. This time I'm going to repeat it in a slightly different way. I'd like to have the leaves pointing up. I've got one little sort of leafless branch here. I'll take that off. So I want the leaves to point up now. So I'm going to lay them across the top, perpendicular to the main branch. They're perpendicular. The leaves are pointing away from me. I'm going to bend the stem underneath. And now between, I'll put these over here. Between the first branch that I laid and where the leaves are sticking up, I will bend the stem that I've added over top. We'll do that again. All the stems that I'm adding, by the way, are now pointing in the same direction as my first main stem. We're just going to keep repeating this and you'll eventually get it. It will make sense. Okay, another single one. I want these little leaves to be pointing up, the ones at the top. So I'm laying the stem perpendicular to the main stem, perpendicular. The little leaves are pointing away. I'm going to bend the stem, go in between the last branch that I just placed and the one that I am now currently placing. And I want to make sure my leaves are still pointing away from me. And I'll take that stem and bend it over top. Okay. Let's see if we can do this in a way where you can see more clearly. So right now I've got two little bunches of leaves pointing away from me. Okay, there they are. This is the main stem, plus all of the other ones that I've folded so that they are now pointing in that direction. Let's take one of the purple flowers. Purple flower. It's going to point away from me, and I'm laying it directly over top the main stem. I'm going to fold it. Oops, now it broke. Well, so here's an interesting thing that we can talk about. What I didn't do. So part of what I do sometimes with stems that are a little bit stiff like this is that I squish them between my fingers. And as I squish them between my fingers, they become more pliable. And rather than break like it did there, they bend. They have less inclination to break. So we're going to repeat that. I'm going to have to put my little flower aside because I'll have to maybe float it in a lovely little glass of water. It'll be pretty. Let's try that again. Squish the stem. Squishing the stem, especially near the top where I want to bend it. I'm going to test and see if I can actually bend it. Yes, it's pretty bendy. Okay. My fingers will smell lovely, like chives. Okay, here we go. Place the flower away from me in the same direction as those lovely first leaves. Bend the stem under, through or between the ones that I've laid and the one that I just placed. Bend it or cross it over, and look, it broke again. Well, this will be interesting, folks. I might be poking my flowers into my braids. That's one way to do this. Well, we're going to try it one more time. Okay, flower, squishy. This time I'm not just going to squish in one direction. Nope, it's still breaking. I'm going to squish it in several directions so that all of the fibers are softened. Let's see how that works. One more time. Lay the flower across the top of the stem perpendicular to it. I'm keeping it close to the main stem so it's not sticking too far out. Bend it underneath. Put it between the leaves that I've already placed and the flower itself. Bend it across the top. Finally, that one worked. Bend it across the top of the flower stem. What does it look like? There you go. Okay. We'll add another leaf. Leaves. I want the leaves to pop up. So I shall place just the tip of that branch across the top of the main stem. Bend it under. Place it between the flower and the one that I'm adding at this moment. And then cross it over. Perhaps you can see it better there. Okay. Shall we try another flower? Let's give it a go. So one of the things that, now I'm going to squish it in both directions, or at least all directions, so that all of the fibers get softened. Hopefully this will work now. Shall we give it a go? Let's give it a go. Okay. Branches and leaves that I just added. What you will find is that this creates a wider and wider band as we go along. Flower lays across the top. Stem bends underneath. I come up between the flower and the leaf branch that I just did and lay the rest of the stem in line with the main bundle of stems. By the way, that squishing in all directions seems to have done the trick. Okay, So how does this look now? There we go. Now that there's a little bit more flow and ease, I can begin to focus on my intention. So one of the main intentions that I'm personally going to work with is my relationship with the waters here, which I'm going to be dedicating myself to over the coming year of personal land reparation ceremonies. And so when I go to release this particular wreath, I would like to use that opportunity to honor the developing of that relationship with the waters of life. So I said that the solstice ceremony is or the solstice rite works with both the fire and the water. You know, the fire has reached the height of its intensity in terms of the solar force. We have the longest day of the year, shortest night of the year. And there are, in sort of the old thoughts, two seasons. Well, there was originally 2 seasons before there became 3 and then 4 that were recognized in the Slavic earth timekeeping. So the 2 seasons were the season of light, and the second was the season of dark. We're currently obviously in the season of light. And with the season of light, which runs roughly from the beginning of May until the beginning of November, the element that is most prominent is fire, solar force. And what that means is that when we do ceremonies of release, or sometimes even healing ceremonies during the season of light, we often call on its opposite energy form, which would be water. That's the appropriate release. So when you go to release medicines, when you go to release ritual objects or talismans, you would usually, during the season of light, either release them to wild moving water, or you would bury them in the earth, which is also in, I don't like the word opposition, but in opposition to the fire energy. Whereas in the season of dark, which runs roughly from the beginning of November to the beginning of May, more or less, then what you would be working with is fire as a means of release of either ritual objects or sacred medicines, etc. And so it's not to say that it's taboo to use fire during the season of fire, not at all. It's just that it wouldn't be necessarily the first one that you would go to. And so we release the wreaths to the water. We float them on the waters. That's sort of a common way of honoring both the waters and the life force of the flowers and plants, calling on the waters as part of the cycle of life, calling on them for cleansing, for blessing, for maintaining moisture for the agricultural season, and for helping us with this release. It's getting very fragrant in here with the smell of chives. Okay. So you see me fuss a little bit with this because I didn't my knot came undone. I'm going to redo it. My stem is a little bit short on this one, so that's why it's being a bit fussy. Okay. Add my flower, stem across, under, between, and over. Okay, this is what it's looking like so far. I cannot tell you exactly how much material you're going to need. I usually gather like a armful, little bundle. I think this is going to be plenty for our work today. This particular stem is a little bit, yeah, it's coming apart. Okay, we'll try that again. I didn't anticipate having to do this with the branch, but we're going to squish it too. Just to make it a bit more pliable. And try that again. There we go. So I'm alternating. If you have many different flowers and plants that you're working with, you'll find a pattern that feels right for you for making your wreath. There's no right and wrong in how you construct them. What's important is that you feel happy with how you've made it. What I love about also doing this is that, you know, I can't really predict how it's going to look until it's actually done. It's a very organic, lovely organic kind of a creation. So I'm going to squish this before I work with it. Nope, it broke off. It's one of the things that you can begin to also incorporate into your binding work, which you're doing right now, is to think about what this time of year means to you. Maybe you have a particular association with this time of year. Maybe it means vacation time. Maybe it means time to play with the children outside, or, you know, maybe it has a completely different association with you. So whatever that association is, begin to unfold it into your work in the most positive sense. And think about what the seasons to come have meaning to you. So harvest season, you know, what it means to you to move the wheel of the year to the darkening time of the year. Is that something that feels positive or not so positive to you? If it's not so positive, is there something that you can actually bring in as an intention into your weaving so that you can weave that into the coming year, the coming darkening season in a more positive way? What I like to call the positive darkness. You know, it sounds strange to talk about darkness when we're in this beautiful, bright time of year, but actually it's appropriate because, again, the movement of the year is upon us. So weave your personal prayers, weave your prayers for the earth, weave your prayers for community, for society, for those who are suffering. Weave your prayers for the health of our waters that are currently threatened by many different sources. So one of the things that I do on the morning of the solstice, and again, it's an old practice, that one didn't work out. It's an old practice, is that it's said that dew, morning dew, gathered off of plants and flowers on the morning of the solstice, is particularly potent in its healing force because of the solar force having reached its height. And so before the first direct rays of light fall on those plants, I mean, it can be light outside, but it's best to be done at dawn. And if you can't manage it at dawn, then to go out before the first direct rays of light have fallen where you're gathering. Go out and you gather some of the dew. One of the things that I do is I kind of shake flowers and leaves while I'm holding a bowl and let the droplets fall into the bowl, and then from there pour the water from the bowl into a little jar. And then I keep that and use it in rituals, and sometimes I'll place it into some of the waters that are being used to make dye for the pasunki, especially if it's associated with a healing intention, or for the motanki for the same reason, if it's associated with a healing intention. And so gathering the dew at that particular juncture is really potent. It's potentized water. But you can also gather dew, you know, at other times of the year. That just happens to be one that's the for sure time that I'm going to go outside. Now, occasionally I've gone outside on solstice mornings, and there is no dew. It's so dry out where, you know, I was living. So you may or may not be able to gather it on that day, but if you're able to, if there's enough moisture, that's the day to gather it. And that's part of the water aspect. Water that has been infused with the solar force. So far, this is how it's looking on this side. It's coming quite lovely. I'm going to increase and do 2 flowers and 1 branch because they're going to be imbalanced otherwise. I will have not enough branches and too many flowers. The only other thing that you'll need in this project toward the end is either a strong natural cordage, maybe something that you've made, or I'm going to use for my own a small amount of linen thread. This is pure linen. It's natural, it disintegrates. Because I'll be releasing this to wild moving water, I don't want to use any kind of polyester string or things like that. And if I'm able to, I'll tie the branches with one of the branches that I have here. But if it doesn't want to hold, then I'll use the string. You know, there's many different forms of what we call the waters of life and also the waters of death. So in the Slavic perspective, worldview, folklore, the waters of death are waters that don't mean that they make death. They don't, though they sometimes come from what we call death. Waters associated with the winter, for example, snow and ice that's melting. Those are called the waters of death. Likewise, the first rains that arrive in the spring that melt the snow and ice, those first rains, if you collect that water, is also called the water of death. And it's said that the waters of death, if you were to place them on a wound, help to bind the wound. It's a binding force. So again, it doesn't literally make death. It actually creates binding, but it doesn't reinvigorate life. It doesn't reinstate life. It just binds. So using it for various purposes where it's important to bring something back together, and then using waters of life to reinvigorate the life force. The waters of life are gathered from many, many, many different sources, and at many different points in the year. That's like a whole study in and of itself. And so the waters of life that I often will gather, on one dedicated date for sure, will be on the new moon in May. I go to 3 different wild sources of water, wild moving water, rivers, streams, or lakes that I know have movement to them. And I will take a bit of water from each and again keep it in a jar or jars, depending on how much I'm taking, and use that through the year for various purposes, oftentimes related to doing ceremony work, dye work, and pasanki making, watanki making. Sometimes for other kinds of rituals, energy clearings, prayer rituals, especially if somebody's asked me to do a specific kind of prayer work for them. So now I'm doing 2 flowers, 1 branch. That one may not want to stay. It's not big enough. And you'll see at the end, I'm going to poke in some of these pieces that broke off or were simply not long enough. I'll poke them into the wreath when it's complete. So other sources of water of life would be from wells, natural springs, gathering them during rainfalls, thunderstorms, different phases of the moon, especially letting the water be exposed to moonlight. So we call that moon water. Pretty simple. Oh, I'm supposed to do 2 flowers. So I'm going to turn the video off for a little while. I'll continue to do my weaving, and then we'll pick up again together when I'm almost complete. So as it is, this is the length of the garland. I would say it's like 1.5 feet long, not quite 2 feet, maybe almost 2 feet. And it's about the right length that I need to make it into a circle that fits on the top of my head. Okay. If I make it much bigger, it will sit too far down on my head. So I still have quite a bit of material left, and we still have to adjoin it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let this sit to one side for a moment. And I still have all of these, plus all of the ones that broke, that I can weave into the garland. I think what I'm going to do with this is that I'm going to make a braid. And that particular braid, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, I will adjoin to the front of the Vinok. And again, I want to be cautious in my braiding that I don't overbend my stems. Maybe what I'll do is I'll start it with I will make this part of the tie. What I did is I bent that over top so that they're all held in place. And now I will just begin to braid and add in 1 flower at a time, kind of like a French braid. Oh, they're already breaking. Okay, let's undo that. I think I didn't squish my stems, so I'm going to do that now, just to make them stronger, or more pliable, I should say. And that's the guys who broke. Put them to one side. Let's start again, but with squished stems. I don't mind showing you my blunders, because the blunders are how we learn. And this is the first time I've actually worked with chives in my wreath. though I've had this happen with other flowers as well in past versions. So 3. Tie this, begin to braid. Nope. Still not wanting to work. Too much bend. Okay. One last try, and if it doesn't work, then we're just going to pick off the flowers and tuck them into the wreath. Last attempt. Squished off. Well, I'll still try and braid it in. Maybe these stems will last. It's a little wonky, but it's working. Nope, that one broke right away. Interesting. Well, folks, we'll see how far we got with this. So one of the things I didn't mention at the beginning that I do when I'm gathering some of the flowers, whether they're from my garden space or foraged, is that if there's an insect who's residing on it, today I saw one that had a little bee on it and then another one that had a spider on it, I leave those ones alone. They're somebody's home, or they're somebody's current shelter, or their current food, and so I will not pick that specific plant or flower. It's just a matter of being mindful. So here's what we've got so far, and that will become another row on the Vinok. Okay, so these are just going to be added on. I'm going to place them aligned with the other flowers. And I'm going to use some branches or stems, kind of weave them or attach them. So take one of these ones, it's a little more firm. Wrap it around. Tuck the ends. Hopefully it will stay in place. I'm just taking some of the harder stems that were left over to wrap and tuck. Like I said, there's no right and wrong with this kind of a project. It's very natural. It's obviously very organic. You're allowed to make quote unquote mistakes. There's no real mistakes to be made, to be honest. It's just like, are you able to create something that feels beautiful to you? Okay, so here's where we've gotten to. I added on that second braid of flowers. It's along the inside here. And now we need to attach the two sort of end pieces. So what I usually do is I curl the branches and the two ends together. And again, either using string or if you have bendable enough branches to tie over top, you can. I'm going to attempt it with branches. It's my preference because when I float it into the river, I feel more comfortable knowing that it won't get, because the string takes longer to disintegrate, I don't want birds or fish to get tangled in it or, swallow it. So we'll see how this works. I don't know if you can hear the somewhat satisfying sound of crunching. Again, there's no right and wrong way about how you tie this off. For me, what's important is that simply that it works, it sticks together. So what I'm doing is I'm wrapping these bigger stalks around and then tucking them into different parts. And hopefully that'll be enough to keep it together. I'm not going to be wearing this for any length of time. I don't need it to be perfect. If I were going to an event and needing this to be more strongly bound, I might use the string at that point, just to ensure that it's not going to fall apart. Oops. Oops. Oh, the fun that we have when we weave and bind. Binding our prayers, binding our thoughts and intentions. So this is what it's looking like so far. I'll probably play a little bit with it to get the best placement. Nope. Maybe this way. Well, you get the idea. I'm going to put the last of the flowers in just by tucking them into spaces. So while I continue to tuck, just so you know what your next task is, remember your intentions. Remember what it is that you would like this circle, this wreath to represent. Remember what you bound in as your prayers. And you will take your wreath with you to hopefully a body of water that's nearby. And if you don't have a nearby body of water, you could bring it to the land with a offering of water to the land. So perhaps like a jar of water that you've gathered from your tap or from a well or from um, spring water maybe that you've purchased, if that's the closest access that you have to sort of wild water. And if you're going to a river or a lake, you will stand before the river and or the lake. First ask permission from the spirit of the body of water to release this sacred object, this talisman, to the waters with your prayers. Ask that it carries your prayers with it. If you're going to be doing it on the land, it's the same thing. You might leave it as an offering to the forest or the meadow and pour the water through the center of the Vinok. And as you pour the water, you would offer your prayers. And then you can watch the wreath as it floats in the waters. You can sit with it for a while. You might add other gestures that you want to make as part of the ceremony. And then when you're complete, you leave it. You leave it in nature. You leave it with the waters of the earth with gratitude. All right, I'm going to pause this again, finish tucking the rest of the flowers. Okay, here's the finished piece with all the flowers tucked in. The leaves are a little bit floppy and in my face, but that's okay. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that sometimes, not every year, but some years, I will do a candle, a prayer candle. And the way that I do a prayer candle is to take the same intention that I've put into my weaving and I scribe it into a candle. It could be a taper candle, a votive candle. If you use a pillar, realize that the ritual is going to be a very long ritual. So I scribe it using a sharp pencil. The pencil doesn't leave literally pencil marks, but you use it like a carving tool in the side of the candle. So you carve your intention in. If your intention is really long, if it's got like lots of words to it, then you might draw a few symbols that represent that intention. So if your intention is for, I don't know, let's say well-being, and there's many words that are included in that phrase of well-being, then you might just use the word well-being in and of itself and let that represent the entire intention. Or you might create, I don't know, a little picture of a flower that represents to you well-being. So that's just an example. So you scribe it into the side of your candle, and then you bless your candle. Use an essential oil, and using a finger, bless the candle by swiping from the tip to the base in single swipes along the candle. And cover the entire, or coat the entire candle. So you're going to have to turn it and swipe, turn and swipe, turn and swipe. Try not to pick up your finger part way through. Just one long swipe from tip to base. And when you've completed that, then I'll wrap it in like a piece of Kleenex or tissue and take the candle with me to the body of water or to the earth where I'm going to do the release ceremony of the wreath. I will light the candle as I'm stating my prayer or intention before I release the wreath. And then when I'm complete the ritual and I'm holding the candle during that time, or I have it in an appropriate container, then I will snuff out the candle, not blow it out, but snuff it out, and then take the candle back home with me and light the candle each day approximately at the same time and let it burn for whatever amount of time you choose. Could be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, while you are reaffirming that particular intention. And you keep doing that every day until the candle is completed its burning. So you can see if you bought a big pillar, it could take a long time, many months even. But that might be appropriate for the intention that you set. If it's a taper candle or a votive candle, it might just be, lasting over a week of continuous, not continuous, but lighting and then relighting. Each time that you go to put the candle out, snuff it out, don't blow it out. And when it's complete and you have a little tiny bit of leftover wax, then you can take that leftover wax and bury it as another form of release, preferably where no people's feet will walk on it. And hopefully it's been natural wax that you've used so that it will be reabsorbed into the earth. I wish you a very, very beautiful solstice. I would love to see some of the photos of your wreaths, your Vinoks, and would love to hear if there's any stories that accompany them. Blessings. So I'm here at the Winnipeg River, and I'm just showing you where I'm standing. You'll have seen some photos that I also put on the video. A little word about working with the elementals. So in my ceremony work, which has been ongoing since 2021, I have worked in numbers of different settings, a different one each lunation. Sometimes I revisit the same ones year to year, but generally I'm traveling at least 13 different spots per solar year. So I'm standing here just the day before the summer solstice. I'm going to be releasing my Vinok to the river. It's a gift to the river, it's a gift to the lands here, it's a gift, in a sense, to having been welcomed to these different locations in the northwestern Ontario. So I arrived here 11 months ago, not quite a year. And this is one of the first places that I came. There's little swirls that show up in the river. I don't know if they're showing up on the video, but they're lovely to watch. This is one of the first places that I came when I arrived and actually, hiked and spent some time outdoors. And it's an area, I don't know how to say it properly, Wasegabo, which is like a meeting place. And so meeting place of peoples, meeting place of waters and land, meeting place between different water systems. It's a lovely, lovely location and wonderful hiking. Lots of people frequent the area. Last week, on the dark new moon cusp, I had done a ceremony, and I had gone to another place that's sort of in the opposite direction to this location at a provincial park nearby, Rushing River Rapids. And when I had done the ceremony, there was a few things that were sort of keeping me from being really present to the work. Ticks have been horrible this year, and I had found 3 different ticks on 3 different occasions crawling up my clothes. So I was a little bit paranoid, even though I've made myself a natural repellent using essential oils. It only goes so far. So I was feeling a bit paranoid about it because I knew I was going to be walking through some grass areas. And also, again, I was in a public space and people frequent the provincial park, obviously. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. And I also felt a little bit rushed because it's paid parking there, and I'd only paid for a couple of hours, thinking it was going to be straightforward and simple, and then realizing that the ceremony work wasn't so straightforward and simple. And so, all of that to say, I had forgotten some of the protocol. And in forgetting protocol, that's not a great thing. When you've been doing ceremony work consistently and for this long, it's sort of, there's an expectation, I think, by the spirits of the land and the ancestors that, you're going to show up with impeccability. So all of that to say, and I won't go into the details of what was missed and what did happen. But this week was really hard. And what happened was that the time that I had released the medicines to the land and to the river was approximately midday. And for the next several days, I was getting various really painful symptoms in my body, ranging from my toothache to a gut ache to massive headache, day after day, always showing up precisely midday. And I didn't tune in and get it until the fourth day. And when I did get it, the symptoms disappeared. Is that psychological? Is it physical? Was it a spirit intrusion? Was it a spiritual illness? I probably would say it was a spiritual illness. It was basically my wake-up call, a little slap on the hand. Hey, remember protocol. Don't ever forget. And that's one of the things when we do these kinds of ceremonies. I'm not saying this to scare you. Please begin to do whatever work feels right for you. But remember that it's really important to understand that once you begin to forge a relationship with place, with the spirits of place, with the ancestors, yours and the ancestors of place, there will be expectations that you follow through with a good heart, with actions that are consistent with what it is that you're performing as a ritual or ceremony. So here we are today. I'm going to be releasing the Vinok. Hopefully I'll be able to record it without having too much of a shaky camera. And then I want to talk a little bit about the elementals, which I mentioned in the making of the wreath, and just wanted to kind of finish up on that piece. Blessings, with beautiful swirls that are starting to form. She goes on her journey downriver. See what happens when she gets to the main current. I had found a feather on the walk to the spot and added it to the Vinok. So as it's carried into the next part of the current, I'm going to talk a little bit. So I mentioned that solstice is a celebration of fire and water. Here we have the waters. It's also a celebration of earth. It's the impact that the fires and waters have on fertility in the earth. You know, our bodies are made of earth, but our bodies are also made of water and fire and wind. And all of these elementals are very, very important in the fertility and abundance of life. So the winds are kind of crazy. I don't know how much I'll be able to capture of the sound on the video, but I don't know if you can see it way down there still floating. I watched as the Vinok made one full circuit, just like a whole spiral, went down, came back up, circled round in an eddy current, came back by me, so I took a bunch of photos, and then now I'm watching it as it's going off further down the river, which is lovely. So, as I had been saying about fire and water and earth and wind, as the winds are blowing, they're all so incredibly vital to the fertility and abundance of life. And when we work in rhythm with the elements that are heightened and also their opposites, there's a duck or a goose, I'm not sure, going to meet the wreath just to check it out. That's cool. Oh, she's chasing it. Oh, that's funny. Now she's moving away from it. Huh. Little blessings. So as I had mentioned, when we work in rhythm with the various energies of the elements, both in their time of height and in their time of opposition, what we're working with is an understanding of how to both proliferate life and to help heal life. You can see people add their artistry here. And so this being the time to recognize the fire and water with this particular solstice ceremony is very important for the continuation of the abundance of life.